Use the teleport button to move forward into the chapel. Depending on your controller configuration, you can adjust the direction you'll be facing when you teleport, as shown by the arrow on the floor. Feel free to move around during your tour to get a better vantage point. Go ahead and try this now. We will begin shortly. Hold down the Inspect button to highlight individual figures or details with the laser pointer. Once you are satisfied with your selection, you can release the Inspect button, and I will tell you more about that item. By the altar wall, you will see a disassembled wooden scaffold and a conservator's aerial work platform. Click the wooden scaffold to go up and learn more about how Michelangelo painted the ceiling. Click the aerial work platform to see the ceiling from a higher vantage point where you can learn about the cleaning and restoration. These Quattrocento frescoes were painted. This is the actual aerial work platform that the Vatican conservators used to inspect the ceiling. Hold on, we're going to teleport up there. You can now press the touchpad to move around at this height. If you'd like to learn about the cleaning and restoration, click the dirty spandrel that is lit with a spotlight. To teleport back down, click on the chapel floor. The cleaning of the Sistine Chapel ceiling is the most controversial restoration project in the history of art. It was funded by a Japanese television company in return for photographic rights to the ceiling. How do you sell photographic rights to something that has no copyright? A work that's been in the public domain for hundreds of years? By screaming over a loud PA system at any visitor or tourist who attempts to take a photo. Let's travel back in time to the 1960s. Here's an approximation of how the chapel ceiling looked in 1965, taken directly from scant photographic evidence. The ceiling had really darkened over 500 years. Early cleaners had used these rabbit glue varnishes to try and shine up the ceiling and bring back some color, but those same varnishes became darkened by hundreds of years of soot from candles, oil lamps, and incense. If you climbed the wooden scaffold to hear about how Michelangelo painted the ceiling, you learned about how color bonds into wet plaster, locking it in. At the time of the cleaning, the Vatican made the assumption that Michelangelo only painted on wet plaster. Going back later and painting on dry plaster is called a secco, and that's frowned upon by fresco painters because it's less durable. It can chip off, or, in this case, be scrubbed off. Here's the time where I again remind you Michelangelo isn't a painter. Many art historians claim that Michelangelo did paint a secco. He did this to retouch and fix areas, and also add black to shade and darken parts of figures, most notably their eyes. It was important to him that you could read the exact gaze direction from the floor, as we've discussed. The Vatican, of course, claims this is false. They only removed grime and soot, showing Michelangelo's true artistic intent. But you, my friend, are in the unique position to judge for yourself. Imagine that you're a Vatican restorer. We're going to scrub the Jesse spandrel here with a sponge soaked in the harsh chemical compound. Let's wipe away years of soot and grime to reveal Michelangelo's true work. Apparently, decorating flat walls with realistically painted drapery was a big thing back in the 1400s. Only a 600-year wait for normal mapping and displacement. Ah, there we go. Cigarette joke. Apparently, decorating flat walls with realistically painted drapery was a big thing back in the 1400s. Only a 600-year wait for normal mapping and displacement. Ah, there we go. Cigarette joke. It is dangerous to attempt to describe the Last Judgment. It is indeed impossible. Analyses and commentaries have been multiplied, but they kill the spirit by taking it in detail. We must face the vision squarely and lose ourselves in the abyss of that spirit. It is terrifying, and if regarded calmly, incomprehensible. It must be hated or adored. It stifles and excites. There is no nature, no landscape, no atmosphere, no tenderness, almost nothing human. The symbolism of a primitive and the science of a decadent. An architecture of naked, convulsed bodies, a barren, savage, and devouring thought, like a south wind over a sandy desert. There is no corner of shade, no spring to slake the thirst. It is a whirling spout of fire, the vertigo of a delirious emotion, with no goal except the God in which it loses itself. The whole calls on God, fears him, and proclaims him. A whirlwind blows across this throng of giants, the same whirlwind which sweeps through space, the God who has created the sun and hurled it like a ball of fire into the ether. There is no escape from the groaning of the tempest which surrounds and deafens you. Either you must hate this brutal force or abandon yourself to it without resistance, like the souls of Dante whirled along by an eternal cyclone. When we realize that that hell was for 4 Here, painted at the same time as the Quattrocento frescoes below them, are 28 predecessors to Pope Sixtus, each tucked away in his own false niche. Because the primary function of the chapel was to be the room where cardinals would elect a new pope, I suppose it made sense to have someone paint a history of popes. That said, these guys are easily the least photographed and discussed items in this room. This is The Temptations of Christ by Sandro Botticelli. This is The Temptations of Christ by Sandro Botticelli. This is The Baptism of Christ by Perugino. What's depicted in the areas above the windows, the lunettes, is an unbroken genealogical succession from altar to entrance, showing the ancestors of Christ as listed in the first book of Matthew. For hundreds of years, these Apparently, decorating flat walls with realistically painted drapery was a big... This is The Baptism of Christ by Perugino. This is The Journey of Moses in Egypt by Perugino. In 1522, the architrave over this main door gave way just after the Pope had entered the chapel. It crushed and killed 2 guards and destroyed the 2 Quattrocento frescoes by Ghirlandaio and Signorelli that were originally here. These 2 later frescoes that replaced them are the discovery of the body of Moses and the resurrection of Christ.